Hello, Connecting to Science fans. This is Dr. Matthew McBroom, and today I'm going to give you a brief overview of how to read a scientific journal article. First of all, when we read scientific journal articles, we don't necessarily read them in the same way that we do novels or even newspaper or magazine articles. Typically, we're reading more in a content-oriented fashion when we read a scientific journal article. The way to begin is thinking about what is the question or the problem that's being addressed, and then how was that problem addressed, and what were the ultimate results from that. So I've given you an example here from a publication that deals with a very important topic in our part of the world. Whenever you begin looking at a scientific journal article, the first thing to do is look at the title. A good title should help with the understanding of what's being addressed. In fact, a good title should actually kind of leave a question in your mind. In this case, Soil Erosion and Surface Water Quality Impacts of Natural Gas Development in East Texas. When you read this, assuming that you understand the basic words and terminology, and you may have to look some of these words up from time to time, but assuming that you understand what this is saying, it should pose a question in your mind. In other words, when you read a title like this, the first thing that pops into your mind should be, hey, what are the effects of natural gas development in East Texas on soil erosion and surface water quality? Well, the answer to that question is usually given in the abstract. The abstract is kind of the what, where, and how, and why of the journal article, abbreviated usually into around 250 words. A good abstract should tell you a very basic general statement of the problem, then very basically what the methods were to resolve this problem, then a little bit about the results from that. In this case, we saw a significant increase in runoff. We saw a large increase in sediment on the well pad that was put in the middle of the creek versus the one that wasn't. So we see a dramatic difference in the two treatments. And what are the overall contextual impacts of this? Well, the one that was put in the creek was about 10 times or 100 times higher than a clear cut in the same area. Also, with that, there's usually some kind of statement about the management implications, like in this case. While there may be, and certainly there is potential here to degrade surface water, we can use conservation practices to help mitigate that. So once you understand the question and know the answer to the question, the next step is to dig a little more into the answers to that question. And usually, to be honest with you, what I do next is I look at the pictures. So I kind of skim through, I look at where the study was located if there's a good map. Here you're kind of now oriented if you're not familiar with Texas as to where this place is located. Then I'll usually kind of skim through and look at, maybe they have a map like in this case showing where the treatments were laid out at. Here's our two well pads, and there's where they actually drilled the well at. And this one, this is where they drilled the well, and they had to move the stream around the well pad, which significantly, of course, is what caused the erosion problems. You may also look at other images or illustrations. In this case, you can see pretty dramatically the difference in these two treatments. Here's what it looks like before, and here's what it looks like after. And so while the numbers are maybe kind of hard to get your head around sometimes things like this can also help you understand more effectively. Typically there'll be charts or graphs. You can flip through and look at those. This particular chart shows how the red line here, the well pad that was put in the middle of the creek, went up dramatically and pretty rapidly compared to the green line here, the well pad that was not put in the middle of the creek. So you can kind of evaluate the treatment differences just by looking at the graph and kind of wrap your head around what the authors are trying to say. There may be charts and there may be tables that show values or averages or statistical tests that were done, which are also useful. There may be other illustrations or photographs. This particular one shows the results of a saltwater spill on one of our locations. You can see where the water ran down the hill here, and these red trees here are loblolly pine, and loblolly pine is not deciduous, therefore when it turns orange it's dead. So we actually saw some mortality here in our riparian buffer. The creek is right down there at the bottom of the hill. So that can show you some things also. So after I kind of look at the pictures, a lot of times then I just jump to the conclusions, to be honest with you. Go in and see what the authors had to say in conclusion that supported more of that what was the answer. Then once I'm satisfied that I understand what the researchers were doing and what the answer was in general, I'll usually back up and then start looking at the introduction to gain an understanding about how these results fit into the broader scientific context. I'll start looking at the methods so that I understand the methodology that was used and was it valid and was it the right way of doing this. Then I'll skim over into the results typically. And the results section of the article is where it really gets technically challenging sometimes. So here's where you'll hear a lot about the statistical methods and the analytical techniques that were used, and can actually be, as I said, rather challenging sometimes. But once you understand the question and the answer to the question, this is where the authors provide the support for the answer to that question. So that's why it's important to read through the results section quite detailed. Once you have that, once you understand what the problem was, what the answer to the problem was, and did the authors really back up their answer, you may look at some other details within the article. For example, who funded the article? That might be an important thing for some aspects. This particular one was funded by National Council for Air and Stream Improvement and SFASU, and we did this on the Campbell Group lands. That can be important for you to understand. Also, it's a good idea to look at the authors and their affiliations. Are these credible people or are they fly-by-nighters? And another thing to think about is what journal was this published in? We'll spend some more time when we get to scientific publications, but not all journals are created equal by far. And unfortunately, there are a lot of journals out there that are less than credible. This particular one is an international journal published by the Swiss. And this journal is published by a Swiss company called MDPI. One of the things you can look at is the journal impact factor. Typically in the water resources world, if you're greater than 1, that's pretty good. Science or nature may be up there around 30, but for a specific area like water, this tells you that this is a journal that's been around for a little while. Another nice thing about this journal is that it's open access. You see that word there, open access. That means that all of these articles are free. You don't have to pay a subscription fee. And once you understand that it is a credible source and you know the answer to the question, and then you pretty well can effectively fill in the blanks otherwise. So I hope this helps you understand how to read a journal article more effectively, and we'll be connecting with science more in future times together.